I never wanted to live in an HOA neighborhood. The very concept felt like paying extra for the privilege of being told what to do with my own property. But when Sarah got that promotion at Memorial Hospital, we needed to move closer to her work, and Pennycrest Estates was the only place in our price range with decent schools. It can't be that bad, Sarah reassured me as we toured the model home. Look how clean everything is, and the community pool looks amazing. The real estate agent, Diane, beamed at us. Pennycrest is the most desirable community in the county. The HOA ensures everything stays pristine. That's why property values here have increased 32% in the last 5 years alone. I nodded skeptically. How much are the HOA fees? Only $375 a month, Diane replied cheerfully, as if that wasn't enough for a decent car payment. It covers all common areas, the pool, clubhouse, and ensures community standards are maintained. 2 weeks later, we were homeowners in Pennycrest Estates. The movers had barely left when our doorbell rang. A petite woman in her late 50s with immaculate blonde hair styled into a rigid helmet stood on our porch, clutching a leather portfolio. Welcome to Pennycrest. I'm Belinda Simmons, HOA president. Her smile reminded me of a shark, all teeth, no warmth. I brought your welcome package and community guidelines. She thrust a 3-inch binder into my hands. It felt heavier than our mortgage paperwork. I personally ensure our community maintains its standards, she continued. I've been president for 11 years now. We run a tight ship. Sarah appeared behind me, extending her hand. Nice to meet you. We're excited to be here. Belinda's eyes narrowed slightly as she took in Sarah's medical scrubs. Oh, you work at the hospital? How? Demanding. I hope it won't prevent you from keeping up with your property obligations. Before Sarah could respond, Belinda pointed to our moving boxes stacked in the garage. Those should be cleared within 48 hours. Visible storage in garages is a violation. Page 47, Section 3.2 of your guidelines. She glanced at her diamond-encrusted watch. I'll let you get settled. The Architectural Review Committee meets Tuesday at 4 p.m. You'll need approval before making any changes to your property, even interior ones visible from windows. After she left, I flipped through the binder. Rules about grass height, 2.25 to 2.75 inches exactly. Approved mailbox designs, only one option, available through the HOA for $285. Garbage can placement, invisible from street view, retrievable only between 7 p.m. 9 p.m. on collection day, and an exhaustive list of prohibited items including basketball hoops, non-neutral window coverings, and bizarrely, bird feeders. Sarah, have you seen this? I called out. We can't have more than 2 people in our driveway after 8 p.m. without a gathering permit that costs $50. 3 days later, I found a lime green notice on our door. Violation. Unapproved vehicle parking. The citation included a photo of Sarah's colleague's car in our driveway the previous evening when she carpooled home. Please remit $75 fine within 7 days. Second violations incur $150 penalty. It was signed with a looping, elaborate Belinda Simmons, HOA president, and included a personal note. Parking violations disrupt our community's visual harmony. I've scheduled a courtesy meeting to discuss your adjustment to Pennycrest standards. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my house Menace 37 Pennycrest Lane. I crushed the paper in my fist. We hadn't even been here a week. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of my war with Belinda. A conflict that would eventually lead to her calling 911 on me during her husband's memorial service. I had no intention of attending Belinda's courtesy meeting, but Sarah convinced me otherwise. Just hear her out, she said, sipping her coffee before her early shift. We have to live here, Mike. Let's try to keep the peace. Reluctantly, I walked the 3 blocks to Belinda's house at precisely 9:00 a.m. Her home was identical to every other in Pennycrest, except for the ornate gold house numbers and the perfectly symmetric topiaries flanking her doorway. I noticed her lawn appeared precisely trimmed, likely with a ruler and scissors rather than a standard mower. Belinda answered the door in a peach cardigan and pressed slacks, her helmet hair unmoved by the morning breeze. Right on time. Punctuality is a virtue in Pennycrest. She ushered me into an immaculate living room that looked more like a furniture showroom than a lived-in space. "Coffee?" she offered, already pouring from a silver carafe. "Thanks," I mumbled, accepting the delicate cup. "Now," she began, sitting ramrod straight across from me, "I understand you're new to covenant-controlled communities. There's always an adjustment period." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "But I find most people appreciate our standards once they understand the benefits." I tried diplomacy. "We certainly appreciate a well-maintained neighborhood, but the fine seems excessive for a friend's car in our driveway." Belinda's smile tightened. "Rules exist for a reason, Mr. Lambert. Before I became president, this neighborhood was declining. People parking commercial vehicles, children's toys left on lawns, unapproved paint colors." She shuddered. "Property values were stagnant. Now they rise year after year." "But surely occasional visitors." "The slippery slope begins with occasional exceptions," she interrupted. "First a friend's car, then a work truck, then a boat, and suddenly we're no better than Meadowbrook Heights." She said the neighboring development's name like it was a communicable disease. I sipped my coffee. "I understand consistency, but—" "Wonderful." She clapped her hands together. "Then you understand why the $75 fine stands. Now, I noticed your garage door was open for 37 minutes yesterday while you unloaded groceries. That exceeds our 15-minute maximum for open garage doors." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "You're timing how long my garage door stays open." "Community monitoring is my responsibility," she replied. "I've waived that violation as a one-time courtesy." "Oh, and your trash bins were visible from the street on Tuesday." "They were behind the fence." "Visible through the slats," she corrected, sliding a photo across the coffee table showing a tiny glimpse of our black garbage bin through our fence. "That's another $75. I set my cup down carefully before I crushed it. "This is ridiculous." "What's ridiculous is the hedge trimming you attempted last weekend," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "All landscaping must be performed by Evergreen Services, our approved vendor." She slid another form across the table. "They'll correct your work next Tuesday. The fee is $225. For trimming a hedge I already trimmed. For correcting unauthorized landscape modifications," she clarified. "Judge Simmons and I believe strongly in maintaining standards. My husband may be semi-retired from the bench, but his commitment to order remains unwavering." The name registered. "Your husband is Judge Walter Simmons." "From county court?" Her smile turned genuine for the first time. 30 years on the bench. His reputation for strict sentencing is well known." Suddenly, her power trip made more sense. "I'll expect payment for both violations by Friday," she continued, standing to indicate our meeting was over. "The landscapers require payment in advance." As I walked home fuming, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, "URGNT, Violation Notice, Unapproved Window Covering." Apparently, the navy blue curtains in our bedroom were not within the approved neutral palette and needed to be replaced within 72 hours to avoid a $150 fine. I showed Sarah the notice when she returned from her shift. "They're dictating our curtain colors now," she said incredulously. "This is insane." "It gets worse," I replied. "Did you know Belinda's husband is Judge Simmons, the one they call Maximum Sentencing Simmons?" Sarah's eyes widened. "No wonder everyone's afraid of her." "Well, I'm not," I declared. "I'm not paying these ridiculous fines, and I'm definitely not changing our curtains." It was the first real stand in what would become a neighborhood war, one that would escalate far beyond curtains and trash cans. My refusal to pay the fines or change our curtains triggered what Sarah started calling the Belinda Blitz. Every morning, a new violation notice appeared on our door. Our mailbox was insufficiently polished. The wreath Sarah hung on our front door contained non-approved seasonal foliage. Even the welcome mat was deemed excessively whimsical and therefore in violation of the exterior decor clause. Each violation came with another fine, ranging from $50 to $250. Within 2 weeks, we supposedly owed the HOA over $1,200. This is harassment, Sarah said, tossing the latest notice for excessive wind chime resonance onto our kitchen counter. We don't even have wind chimes. I was about to respond when a knock came at our door. I opened it to find our neighbor from across the street, Frank Martinez, looking nervously over his shoulder. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. Once inside, Frank explained he'd been watching Belinda's campaign against us. She does this to anyone who stands up to her. Last year, the Thompsons tried fighting back when she fined them for having a bird bath. 2 months later, they moved out after she got the water company to shut off their service over a suspicious leak. "Can she even do that?" Sarah asked. Frank shrugged. "Her husband has connections everywhere. But listen," he lowered his voice further, "there's a neighborhood meeting tonight. Not an official HOA meeting. Just residents. At the Pato's house on Oak Circle. 8 p.m. Some of us want change, but we need numbers." That night, we discovered we weren't alone. 15 households were represented in the Pato's basement, each with their own Belinda horror story. Eleanor Wilson, a retired teacher, had been fined for planting tulips instead of approved daffodils. The Chen family had received violations when their teenage son practiced violin with his window open. James and David Kowalski were fighting a $500 fine for displaying their pride flag during Pride Month. The problem, explained Rowan Patel, is that Belinda stacked the board with her friends. Her best friend, Carol, is the treasurer. Carol's husband works for the same law firm as Judge Simmons' brother. The secretary is Patricia Williams, whose landscaping business gets all the HOA contracts. "Classic corruption," I muttered. "There's more," Eleanor added. "The HOA fees have doubled in 5 years, but services have decreased. The pool hours were cut, the playground equipment is falling apart, and they canceled community events. Where's all that money going?" We formed an informal coalition that night, the Pennycrest Resistance, as Frank jokingly called us. Our first act was to request copies of the HOA financial records, which homeowners were legally entitled to review. 3 days later, Belinda appeared at our door, her face flushed with anger. "I understand you're behind this coordinated harassment," she hissed, waving the request letters. "These are confidential board materials." "Actually," I replied calmly, "state law requires HOAs to make financial records available to all homeowners. Section 720.303 of the state code, if you'd like to look it up." Her eyes narrowed. "I see you've done your homework, but you're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Lambert. Judge Simmons doesn't appreciate rabble-rousers disturbing our community peace." Before I could respond, she pointed to our lawn. "Your grass is 3.1 inches tall. That's 0.35 inches above regulation height. That'll be $150. And your garbage can is visible again, another $75. As she stormed off, Sarah joined me at the door. "What was that about?" "War," I replied. "She knows we're organizing." The next morning, violations appeared on every door of those who had attended our meeting. The paddles were cited for unauthorized gathering exceeding occupancy limits. Eleanor was fined for her bird feeder. The Chens received a noise violation. But Belinda had miscalculated. Her retribution united us further. When I checked our mailbox that afternoon, I found an anonymous envelope containing photocopies of HOA bank statements. Someone on the inside was helping us. As I reviewed the statements, my jaw dropped. Nearly $100,000 had been paid last year to a company called Simmons Consulting for landscape design services. A quick internet search revealed no such company existed, except as a business registration filed by Walter Simmons, Jr., the judge's son. We now had proof of what appeared to be blatant financial impropriety, but before I could share it with the others, disaster struck. I awoke to the sound of an engine idling outside our house. It was 5:30 a.m., still dark. Through the window, I spotted a tow truck backing into our driveway, its yellow lights flashing in the pre-dawn gloom. "What the hell?" I muttered, rushing downstairs in my pajamas. The driver, a burly man with a patchy beard, was already hooking up to Sarah's car when I burst outside. "Hey, what are you doing?" I demanded. He barely glanced at me. "HOA violation. I got paperwork." He handed me a form bearing Belinda's signature, authorizing the removal of an unauthorized vehicle creating community visual disruption. "That's my wife's car. She's a doctor and has a shift in an hour." The driver shrugged. "Take it up with the HOA. I'm just doing my job." I stepped between him and the car. "You're not taking this vehicle. It's legally parked in our own driveway." "Sir, I have authorization." "What you have is about 10 seconds before I call the police for attempted grand theft auto," I countered, pulling out my phone. "This is private property, and you have no legal right to remove this vehicle." He hesitated, then muttered something under his breath. "Fine. Your problem, not mine." He began unhooking the tow apparatus. As he drove away, Sarah appeared in the doorway, clutching her coffee. "What's going on?" I handed her the towing authorization. "Belinda tried to have your car towed. Apparently, it's been parked in our driveway for more than 12 consecutive hours, which violates Section 7.9 of the Community Guidelines." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "I'm on call this week. I need my car. People could literally die if I can't get to the hospital." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the HOA lawyer, a formal land notice. According to the document, we now owed $3,750 in unpaid fines, and the HOA was placing a lien on our property. "They can't do this," Sarah whispered, reading over my shoulder. "Can they?" "They're trying," I replied, feeling sick. "But this is just the beginning." That afternoon, I received a certified letter informing me that our water would be shut off in 48 hours due to unauthorized landscape modifications affecting community drainage patterns. Another notice indicated our HOA voting rights had been suspended for creating community discord. When I tried to leave for work the next morning, orange construction cones blocked our driveway. A sign claimed mandatory infrastructure repairs. No vehicle access menace 7 days. No workers were present. No permits posted. I moved the cones and drove to work, only to return home to find a $500 fine for tampering with community safety equipment. That evening, as our resistance group gathered at Frank's house, we compared notes. Everyone who had requested financial records had been targeted similarly: liens, utility shut-off threats, parking restrictions, and other harassments. Midway through our meeting, Eleanor received a call from her daughter. Someone had entered Eleanor's house and turned off her air conditioning unit. The temperature inside had reached 95 degrees, dangerous for the 78-year-old widow. "This has gone beyond petty power trips," Frank said gravely. "This is elder abuse." James Kowalski, who worked as a paralegal, spoke up. "I've been researching. What they're doing violates several state laws on HOA governance. The selective enforcement, the self-dealing with board members' businesses, the failure to properly notice meetings. It's all illegal." "So we file a complaint with the state?" I asked. "We could," he nodded, "but cases like that take months or years to resolve. Meanwhile, they can make our lives hell." "We need leverage," Sarah said, her expression hardening. "Something immediate." That's when Rowan Paddle, who had been quietly reviewing the financial documents I received, looked up with wide eyes. "I think I found it," he said, pushing a spreadsheet across the table. "Look at these transfers to Simmons Consulting. They line up exactly with deposits to an offshore account listed in Judge Simmons' financial disclosure forms from his last year on the bench." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Are you saying?" Frank began. "Money laundering," Rowan finished. "They're using the HOA to funnel money into their personal accounts." I sat back, stunned. This isn't just about power or pettiness. This is criminal. "If we expose this," Sarah whispered, "they'll do more than tow our cars." She was right. We were no longer dealing with an overzealous HOA president. We were dealing with potential felons who had the connections and power to destroy us. But they had already pushed us to the breaking point. There was no going back now. We need a three-pronged approach, I said, spreading documents across our dining table. It was past midnight, but our resistance group's core members, Sarah, Frank, Roman, Eleanor, and the Kowalskis, were still energized. First, legal protection, James suggested, pointing to a stack of papers. I've drafted a temporary restraining order request. The evidence of selective enforcement and harassment should be enough for emergency relief. Second, Rowan continued, financial exposure. I've analyzed these records. Over $380,000 has moved through Simmons Consulting in the past 3 years, all from our HOA fees. We need to alert regulatory authorities. And third, Sarah added, public pressure. Judge Simmons cares about his reputation. If the community learns about this corruption, they'll revolt. We spent the night developing our plan. James would file for the TRO first thing in the morning. Rowan would submit evidence to the state attorney general's office. Frank, who worked for a local news station as a cameraman, would quietly tip off a reporter he trusted. We should also call an emergency HOA meeting, Eleanor suggested. Force them to face the homeowners directly. According to the bylaws, an emergency meeting could be called with signatures from 25% of homeowners. By dawn, we had a delegation ready to collect those signatures. I slept for a few hours before heading to work, only to find an email from my boss requesting an urgent meeting. When I arrived, he seemed uncomfortable. Mike, I received a concerning call from Judge Simmons yesterday, he said, not meeting my eyes. He mentioned you're involved in some disruptive activities in your neighborhood. My stomach tightened. I've been asking questions about HOA finances, yes. He suggested you might be becoming unstable, confrontational, not the kind of person we want representing our firm. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you firing me because I questioned my HOA's accounting practices? My boss fidgeted. No, just a friendly warning. The judge has significant influence with our Betas clients. Tread carefully. The intimidation was escalating. When I called Sarah to tell her she had similar news, the hospital administration had concerns about her community standing. But our plan was already in motion. By noon, James had filed for the TRO. By 3 p.m., our petition for an emergency meeting had the required signatures. Belinda couldn't ignore 200 homeowners demanding answers. The meeting was scheduled for Friday evening at the community center. Meanwhile, Frank's reporter friend began quietly interviewing affected residents. The day of the meeting, I returned home to find a certified letter from the county court. With shaking hands, I tore it open, expecting more bad news. Instead, I found our temporary victory. Judge Martinez, not one of Simmons' cronies, had granted our TRO. The HOA was prohibited from 1. Placing or enforcing liens on any property in the community. 2. Imposing new fines or penalties. 3. Interfering with utilities or access to properties. 4. Taking any retaliatory action against residents. I rushed to share the news with our group. For the first time in weeks, we felt a glimmer of hope. That hope dimmed slightly when we arrived at the community center to find Belinda flanked by the HOA's attorney and several security guards. But our numbers were overwhelming. Nearly 300 residents packed the room, many standing along walls or spilling into hallways. Belinda rapped her gavel sharply. This meeting will come to order. While I question the legitimacy of this gathering, I'll allow brief comments before we adjourn. Actually, I said, standing, according to our bylaws, an emergency meeting called by the required number of homeowners is to be conducted by elected representatives of those homeowners. I held up our petition. We have selected Frank Martinez to chair this meeting. Belinda's face flushed crimson. This is outrageous. I am the president of this association, and we are its members, Frank replied, taking the podium as murmurs of support rippled through the crowd. The people who pay your salary and fund this community. For the next hour, residents aired grievances about selective enforcement, mysterious fees, and retaliatory actions. Belinda sat stone-faced beside her attorney, who frantically whispered in her ear. Then Rowan took the floor with his bombshell. Using a projector, he displayed a series of financial records showing the payments to Simmons Consulting and connecting them to the judge's personal accounts. Our HOA fees aren't improving our community, he explained. They're enriching the Simmons family. A shocked silence fell over the room, followed by outraged shouts. Belinda stood abruptly. These are slanderous accusations, fabricated documents. Judge Simmons will have you all in court for defamation. But her threats fell flat as Frank's reporter friend stood up in the back of the room, cameraman in tow. Ms. Simmons, would you care to comment on these financial discrepancies for Channel 7 News? The blood drained from Belinda's face as she realized this was no longer a neighborhood squabble. It was becoming a public scandal. The morning after our explosive meeting, Channel 7 aired a special report, Neighborhood Tyranny, HOA Corruption Exposed. The segment featured interviews with several residents, financial documents showing the suspicious payments, and footage of Belinda fleeing the community center while refusing to answer questions. By noon, 2 more news stations had picked up the story. By evening, it had gone viral on social media with the hashtag HOA Corruption trending locally. I was preparing dinner when our doorbell rang. Opening it, I found Patricia Williams, the HOA secretary and Belinda's longtime ally. Her usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by nervous fidgeting. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "Not outside." Once inside, Patricia collapsed onto our sofa. "I had no idea about the money," she blurted out. "I swear. Yes, my landscaping company got contracts, but they were legitimate work orders. I didn't know about Simmons Consulting." Sarah crossed her arms. "You've been on the board for 8 years, Patricia. You signed the checks." "I signed what Belinda put in front of me," she admitted. "The board meetings were just for show. The real decisions happened at her dinner parties with the judge." "Why are you here?" I asked bluntly. Patricia straightened. "I want immunity. I'll testify about how Belinda manipulated the board, falsified meeting minutes, and pushed through expenditures without proper approval." "We're not prosecutors," Sarah pointed out. "No, but that man from the Attorney General's office who showed up at my house this morning is," Patricia replied. "Financial crimes investigators are interviewing all board members. I want to get ahead of this." After she left, our phone wouldn't stop ringing. Carol Thompson, the treasurer, was also looking to cut a deal. Even Belinda's assistant administrator called, claiming she had boxes of documents proving her innocence and Belinda's guilt. The rats were abandoning the sinking ship. Judge Simmons called a hasty press conference that afternoon, denying any knowledge of improper payments. "My son's consulting business provides legitimate services to many clients," he insisted. "If there were accounting irregularities at the HOA, that's a matter for their board to address." He was throwing his wife under the bus. The next morning, I received a text from Frank. "Check your email now." An anonymous message had been sent to our entire resistance group containing audio recordings of HOA board meetings where Belinda explicitly directed funds to her husband's consulting company and threatened to make life very difficult for any homeowner who questioned her authority. "These are executive session recordings," Frank explained when we met later. "Completely illegal for them to hide financial decisions in closed meetings. And listen to this." He played another clip where Judge Simmons could be heard advising Belinda on how to structure the payments to avoid scrutiny and which homeowners to target for violations based on their financial vulnerability. "Where did these come from?" I asked. Frank grinned. "Carol Thompson. Apparently, she's been secretly recording meetings for years as her own insurance policy." By late afternoon, the story had reached national news. Vans from major networks lined our street, reporters eagerly interviewing anyone willing to share their HOA horror stories. Amid the chaos, another certified letter arrived, this one from the Owens law firm. They were withdrawing representation due to irreconcilable conflicts of interest and concerns regarding potential criminal liability. The community center parking lot, normally empty on weekdays, was filled with cars as an emergency board meeting was called. Through the windows, we could see board members gesturing angrily at each other. When the doors finally opened, Carol Thompson emerged first, her face grim but determined. She walked directly to where several of us were watching. "The board has voted to remove Belinda as president, effective immediately," she announced. "I've been appointed interim president, and my first act will be to rescind all fines issued in the past year, pending review for selective enforcement." Residents cheered, but Carol held up her hand. "I'm also initiating a forensic audit of all HOA accounts and cooperating fully with authorities. What happened was wrong, and we need to make it right." As if on cue, Belinda burst through the doors, her perfect hair disheveled for the first time since I'd met her. "This is illegal. You can't remove me," she screamed. "My husband will have all of you in court." Carol stood her ground. "The bylaws are clear, Belinda. An unanimous board vote for removal in cases of malfeasance is binding." "Traitors," Belinda hissed, scanning the crowd until her eyes locked on me. This is all your fault. You'll regret the day you move to Pinecrest." She stormed to her luxury SUV, nearly hitting a news van as she sped away. The HOA fortress was crumbling, but I knew Belinda wouldn't go down without a fight. The worst was yet to come. The next few days brought a whirlwind of developments. State investigators seized computers and files from the HOA office. The Attorney General announced a formal investigation into financial fraud and abuse of power. The county court invalidated all liens placed on properties in the past 3 years. Judge Simmons took an abrupt medical leave from his part-time advisory position with the court. Rumors circulated that federal authorities were examining his judicial decisions for patterns of favoritism. Meanwhile, Carol Thompson and the reconstituted board worked diligently to restore order. Fines were canceled, arbitrary rules suspended, and a town hall scheduled to rewrite the community bylaws with homeowner input. It should have felt like victory, but Belinda had vanished, and her final threat lingered in my mind. A week after Belinda's removal, we received devastating news. Judge Walter Simmons had suffered a massive heart attack. Despite his ethical failings, nobody wished this outcome. "He's in critical condition," Frank reported during our neighborhood gathering. "They don't think he'll recover." 2 days later, Judge Simmons passed away. Whatever legal consequences he might have faced, he had now answered to a higher authority. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday at the community center. Despite everything, attendance was expected to be substantial. The judge had served for 30 years and had many professional connections. "Should we go?" Sarah asked the night before. "I think we should," I replied, "not for Belinda, but to respect the office he held, if not the man, and to show we're not vindictive." Most of our resistance group felt similarly. We would attend, sit quietly in the back, and pay our respects without drawing attention. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable rain, a gloomy backdrop for a somber occasion. The community center had been transformed with floral arrangements, professional lighting, and rows of chairs. A large portrait of the judge in his robes stood on an easel beside the podium. Belinda sat in the front row, draped in elegant black, her composure restored. Various officials filled the seats around her. Colleagues, attorneys, and politicians paying their respects to a powerful man. Our group settled discreetly in the back as requested. The service proceeded with formal dignity. A judge delivered a eulogy about Simmons' contributions to jurisprudence. A law school classmate shared polished anecdotes. The State Bar Association presented a posthumous award. Finally, Belinda approached the podium. Her face was a perfect mask of dignified grief as she surveyed the packed room. "My husband dedicated his life to order and justice," she began, her voice steady. "Walter believed in rules, their creation, their application, and their enforcement. He understood that without structure, society crumbles." She continued with rehearsed eloquence, describing their life together and his vision for Pinecrest Estates as a model community. Then her tone shifted. In his final days, Walter was betrayed by those he sought to elevate. Our community, our dream, was attacked by ungrateful residents who rejected his standards of excellence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was veering from memorial into manifesto. Conspiracy theories, slander, and blatant disrespect were the thanks he received for decades of service, Belinda continued, her voice rising. The stress of these attacks directly contributed to his heart failure. Make no mistake, my husband's death was hastened by deliberate persecution. The room tensed as Belinda's carefully constructed composure began to crack. And the architect of this persecution sits among us today, she declared, her finger suddenly jabbing in my direction. That man, Mike Lambert, led a vindictive campaign that destroyed my husband's reputation and ultimately his health. All heads turned toward me. Sarah gripped my hand tightly. He fabricated financial records, turned neighbors against us, all because he couldn't be bothered to follow simple community standards. Belinda's voice had risen to a shriek. He is responsible for Walter's death. The funeral director approached the podium, gently trying to guide Belinda away, but she shoved him aside. This is not grief talking. This is truth. She fumbled in her purse, pulling out her phone. I'm calling 911. I want this man arrested for criminally negligent homicide. The stunned silence gave way to shocked whispers as Belinda actually dialed emergency services. Yes, operator? Her voice echoed through the silent room. I need police at Pennycrest Community Center immediately. I'm reporting a homicide. The perpetrator is here at my husband's funeral, Mike Lambert. He harassed my husband to death, and I have witnesses. As Belinda continued her hysterical accusations into the phone, people began recording with their phones. Carol Thompson shook her head in disbelief. Frank whispered, "She's completely lost it." Two police officers who had been attending the funeral as colleagues of the judge approached Belinda, gently taking her phone. "Mrs. Simmons," one said quietly, "this isn't appropriate. Your husband died of natural causes." "No," she wailed. "It was him. Arrest him." As the officers tried to calm her, Belinda collapsed into uncontrollable sobs. The carefully maintained facade finally shattered completely. The judge's brother quickly took the podium. "We'll take a brief recess. Please, give the family some privacy." As attendees filed outside, I sat motionless, stunned by what had just transpired. Belinda Simmons had just publicly self-destructed during her husband's memorial service, while attempting to have me arrested for his death. The HOA nightmare had reached its bizarre, tragic climax. Belinda's meltdown at her husband's funeral became instant neighborhood legend. Video clips spread across social media faster than gossip at a homeowners meeting. Local news stations ran segments titled HOA Grief or Guilt and Power and Paranoia, when community management goes wrong. The funeral resumed after a 30-minute break, with Belinda noticeably absent. The judge's brother delivered a hastily prepared eulogy that made no mention of Pennycrest Estates or community standards. The service concluded with uncomfortable politeness, mourners avoiding eye contact as they filed out. I learned later that paramedics had sedated Belinda and transported her to the hospital for psychological evaluation. She was released after a 72-hour hold with a diagnosis of acute stress reaction and prescribed indefinite leave from all community responsibilities. 2 days after the funeral, we received a letter from Pennycrest's new legal firm. It contained a formal apology for unprofessional and harmful actions by the previous board, full cancellation of all outstanding fines and liens, and a settlement offer to reimburse homeowners for improperly assessed penalties. They're terrified of lawsuits, Sarah said, reviewing the document. This is damage control. She was right. Carol Thompson, now serving as interim HOA president, had hired a professional management company to oversee operations while the community restructured its governance. Their first recommendation had been to settle quickly with affected homeowners. 1 week after the funeral fiasco, the Attorney General's office announced formal charges against Belinda Simmons for embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of power. The press release carefully noted that Judge Simmons' potential involvement remained under investigation, but no charges would be filed posthumously. She's facing real consequences, Frank said during our victory dinner at the Patols' house. The prosecutor thinks she'll plead guilty in exchange for no jail time, full restitution, 5 years probation, and community service. What about Simmons Consulting? Rowan asked. Dissolved, Frank replied. The son claims he had no idea his company was being used improperly. He's cooperating with investigators. Eleanor raised her glass. Here's to getting our neighborhood back. We all drank to that. The saga's final chapter unfolded at the emergency community meeting called to restructure the HOA. Nearly every household was represented as Carol presented the findings of the forensic audit. Over the past 7 years, she reported, approximately $680,000 was diverted from our accounts through improper channels. With the settlement from the Simmons estate, all funds will be returned to our reserve accounts. The mood was light years away from the tension-filled meetings of Belinda's regime. People asked questions openly, voiced concerns without fear, and even laughed occasionally. When discussion turned to electing a new permanent board, several voices called out my name. No way, I protested. I'm the last person who should be on the board. Exactly why you should be, Frank countered. You stood up when everyone else was afraid. Despite my reluctance, the vote was nearly unanimous. I found myself elected president of the very organization I'd fought against. Sarah couldn't stop laughing at that irony. My first official act was to establish a committee to completely rewrite the community bylaws. The 342-page rulebook was slashed to 15 pages of reasonable guidelines focused on safety and basic standards, not aesthetic micromanagement. Monthly dues were reduced by 40%. The approved plant list was eliminated. Reasonable home-based businesses were permitted. Holiday decorations no longer required pre-approval. 3 months after Judge Simmons' funeral, life in Pennycrest Estates had transformed. Children played on front lawns without fear of violations. Neighbors chatted over fences that no longer required exact Pantone color matching. Gardens bloomed with non-regulation flowers. The final closure came unexpectedly. I was mowing my lawn, at whatever height I deemed appropriate, when a moving truck appeared outside the Simmons residence. Belinda emerged briefly to supervise the movers, sunglasses hiding her eyes. When she spotted me, she froze momentarily. I raised my hand in a small, non-confrontational wave. After a moment's hesitation, she gave a curt nod before disappearing back inside. That evening, Sarah and I sat on our front porch, now adorned with unapproved wind chimes and decorative lanterns, enjoying the sunset. Do you think she learned anything? Sarah wondered. I sipped my beer, considering the question. Probably not. People like Belinda rarely do. But the community learned something important. What's that? That rule should serve people, not the other way around. And that standing together against petty tyranny works. A month later, we learned Belinda had relocated to a luxury condo in another state. Neighborhood rumors suggested she was already campaigning for a position on their condo board. Some people never change, but Pennycrest Estates had changed for the better, and that was enough for me. As the new neighborhood welcome packet now stated, we value harmony over uniformity, community over conformity, and neighbors over rules. Not a bad epitaph for the reign of an HOA Karen who once had me reported to 911 during her husband's memorial speech.